Final ending of The Distance, Part 1 down below. When Darren arrived home, Melissa was asleep on the couch, still in the same dress from earlier, but looking disheveled and exposed. Darren immediately noticed signs of her recent actions that made his heart sink. He silently made his way upstairs, quickly packed an overnight bag with essentials, and then paused at his desk to pen the note he had been contemplating for days. Returning downstairs, he placed the note beside her. Despite his turmoil and the evident betrayal, Darren couldn't help but notice her beauty, which made the situation even more painful. He had hoped they could overcome their issues, yet it was clear that this was the final straw. Melissa had acted on her threats to seek comfort elsewhere, leaving no room for reconciliation. Overwhelmed with emotion, Darren kissed her forehead tenderly before leaving, his departure unnoticed as she was too intoxicated to fully awaken. He checked into a motel, spending a restless night on an uncomfortable mattress, torn between his love for Melissa and the realization that their relationship was irreparable. Complicating matters, Darren reflected on his recent encounter with Jessica. Her kisses were unlike any he had shared with Melissa, hinting at a connection he had longed for but never achieved with his wife. This realization underscored the painful truth that their marriage was over. The following day, Darren took some time off work to address his personal turmoil and initiated the divorce proceedings. He faced a choice between citing adultery or mental cruelty but was advised by his attorney that the specifics would not affect the ultimate goal of securing a fair settlement and his freedom. Despite the circumstances, Darren wished to ensure Melissa was not left without means, reflecting his lingering care for her despite the end of their marriage. Ryan had a strategy laid out for dealing with Melissa and her legal team. He proposed starting with a tough stance in the negotiation, then conceding on minor points to let Melissa and her lawyer feel like they had won something, ensuring a victory on their end. Ryan also pointed out that Melissa hadn't treated him well for a decade, suggesting there was no reason for guilt on his part. Deep down, he felt she had brought this upon herself. Melissa woke up feeling inexplicably low and battling a severe headache, a reminder of last night's excessive drinking. She was puzzled by her deep sadness, given her belief that her marriage could still be salvaged. She admitted to herself that her treatment of Darren was harsh, but it was her misguided attempt at self-defense. Recently, she realized this approach had backfired. Her love for Darren was profound, yet she struggled to express it. Stuck in a harmful pattern, she wondered if breaking free would be more challenging than losing him altogether. With these thoughts overwhelming her, she considered a direct approach, inviting him to lunch to discuss their issues, especially since he had been ignoring her attempts to reach out. Her resolve shattered upon entering their bedroom, where signs of Darren's departure were unmistakable. His belongings, particularly his favorite suits and personal items, were gone. This sudden realization hit her hard, especially since these items were present just the night before. Reflecting on the night Darren left, after a heated exchange, Melissa's response was to drown her frustrations in alcohol. Despite the sting of Darren's accusations, she found humor in the misunderstanding, knowing well that her fidelity wasn't in question. Her past relationship with Ryan, which left deep emotional scars, and her current tumultuous relationship with Darren were the only significant romantic entanglements in her life. Darren's misconceptions stemmed from her attempts to maintain an upper hand through jealousy. However, a nagging suspicion lingered in Melissa's mind, a sense of overlooked danger. She noticed misplaced personal items around the living room, a chaotic reminder of her state the night before. In her solitude, she had let her imagination run wild, longing for Darren's affection. This moment of vulnerability underscored her deep-seated desire to reconcile their differences and confront their issues head-on. That's when it hit her. Darren did come home last night. She recalled his kisses and a blurry memory of him shedding tears over something. Perhaps he was upset, convinced she was unfaithful. Her phone abruptly rang, shaking her out of her thoughts. Stumbling, she reached for it. It was Helen, her voice loud and frantic. "Helen, calm down, my head's pounding. You're just down the road. Why not come over instead of shouting through the phone?" she suggested. Melissa then headed upstairs for a shower, dressed in casual wear, foregoing makeup as she planned to change again before meeting Darren for lunch. Upon Helen's arrival, her greeting was less than flattering. "You look terrible," Helen remarked. "Appreciate it, Helen. That's the kind of support I expect from my best friend," Melissa retorted with sarcasm. "Always there to lift my spirits. If I'm such a good friend, why do you ignore my advice over others?" Helen challenged. "Really, what do you think you'll accomplish? But honestly, if you're going to mess up, I hope it somehow works out for my sister and Darren. What about you, though?" Melissa met her question with a bewildered stare. "I mean, despite everything, I wish them well. It's you I'm worried about," Helen continued. "Wait, Helen. What?" Melissa interjected, confused. "Just hear me out for once," Helen insisted. "I'm older, yeah, and not in my prime, but you'll be in my shoes one day. Back in my wild days, I was even more reckless, married and all. George and I were adventurous, sometimes too much so." Helen's gaze dropped. "I made a mistake, got involved with someone else during a high. George couldn't forgive me. We nearly ended it. A mutual friend suggested George even the score by being with someone else. Even though he did, with my consent, things were never the same. He was unfaithful first, then I followed suit. Suddenly, we found ourselves in what was termed an open relationship. To me, it felt less like freedom and more like a mistake I was trapped in, one that was entirely my fault. My heart had only ever beaten for George, but a night lost to intoxication led me down a path I never intended to take. That's the reason I've sworn off alcohol. Our solution, or so I thought it would be, was joining a club for couples like us. I believed it might mend what was broken between us, transforming hidden indiscretions into a shared venture. We'd venture out, engage with others, then return home together, a unit in theory if not in spirit. George seemed to thrive, becoming increasingly involved with others in the club, while I, lost in the shuffle, found myself in situations I never envisioned, including a particularly revealing moment during a threesome. Looking up, I saw George watching. His request for me to find another way home, citing exhaustion, shattered the moment. Turning away, I caught a glimpse of his genuine emotion, tears, a sight I'd never seen from him before. By the time I returned home, George had departed, leaving only a letter that echoed the confusion and hurt between us. The truth was, I never sought any of this, the affairs, the open relationship, the lifestyle. I thought it was what George wanted. In a misguided attempt at equality, I matched his perceived indiscretions with my own, a tit for tat that poisoned us further. Yet, the night he saw me entangled with others was a revelation for both of us. He was confronted with a reality he couldn't bear, a testament to the fact that love doesn't thrive on possession or control. The greatest revelation, however, was reserved for me. Throughout our dalliances and club visits, I had been living under a false narrative. George's letter unveiled a sobering truth. He had never been unfaithful beyond a fabricated story meant to salvage our relationship from my initial mistake. His involvement in the club, it turned out, was a facade. He had partaken in none of it, a fact I later confirmed. George's acceptance of this lifestyle was a sacrifice, a bid to fulfill a void he perceived in me, underpinned by a fragile ego and a misinterpretation of a drunken mistake as a failing on his part. The realization that his actions were driven by a misguided attempt to be enough for me, to offer me what he thought I desired, was a painful epiphany. It laid bare the profound miscommunications and missteps that had led us to such a heartbreaking juncture. George had always shown me unwavering loyalty and love, something I took for granted as I lost my way, entangling myself with others for 2 years. The night he decided to leave, opting for a divorce and leaving everything behind, including our home, was a wake-up call. He was clear about one thing: he never wanted to see me again. The thought of losing him forever was unbearable. I never intended to stray. It was a series of events that spiraled out of control. Winning him back wasn't easy. It took endless tears, heartfelt apologies, and more than 5 years of therapy. Thankfully, we managed to stay together. George became my pillar, loving me still, though the nature of our bond had irrevocably changed. Our physical connection suffered greatly, turning into a rare and mechanical interaction shrouded in darkness. I could feel his love, yet sensed a barrier between us, a reminder of my past actions. Despite this, I knew he was trying for the sake of our relationship. The fear of losing him haunted me, knowing how deeply I'd hurt him. Exploring alternatives like swinging, thinking it might reignite our spark, was a mistake. It only widened the gap, making me realize that those fleeting moments lacked the emotional depth I truly craved. Real intimacy wasn't about the physical act, but the emotional connection, something I missed deeply. In relationships, the true power lies in vulnerability and mutual support, not in control or seeking fulfillment outside. I learned that the hard way, witnessing others make similar mistakes, chasing after fleeting pleasures or trying to fill voids in unhealthy ways. It's a painful sight, seeing friends lose themselves in the pursuit of acceptance or revenge, not realizing the loneliness and dangers they're courting. As for me, despite the hurdles and the unconventional paths we've taken, giving up isn't an option. Facing our issues head-on, I'm committed to regaining trust and rebuilding our bond. It's about more than just staying together, it's about nurturing the love that survived the storm, understanding that true connection goes beyond the physical, and realizing that real strength comes from vulnerability and mutual support. I'm planning to visit his office today, share a meal, and have a heart-to-heart, Melissa announced. She noticed Helen's disapproving shake of her head. That's not going to pan out, Helen interjected. Melissa, do you recall my younger sister? Somewhat, the one who performed at that venue, right? Melissa replied. She outshines us all in looks, and she's got a figure to match, Helen said. Her wild, brown locks are a hit with the guys, they can't seem to get enough. She exudes this effortless, girl-next-door vibe that seems to attract attention wherever she goes, and she's blissfully unaware of it. I'm green with envy, while you're missing the bigger picture. And why is that? Melissa inquired. Because she's currently the one offering your husband comfort after yesterday's mishap. She's head over heels for him, and post-divorce, she might just be the one he ends up with. You can't compete with that. You think being slim and stylish gives us an edge. That might turn heads, but men are drawn to a more natural allure. Jessica's got the kind of figure that's both enviable and desirable, far more than any of us, and yet she maintains that slender waist, Helen pointed out. She recently did a favor for him that left him thoroughly impressed. He even composed a song for her, something she adores. They're creating new memories daily. Your decade-long history with him pales in comparison, especially considering how you've treated him for the better part of those years. It seems last night was the final blow, Helen added. What final blow? Melissa asked, visibly startled. Last night, you supposedly went out and made a reckless decision, following some ill advice, all to maintain your upper hand, Helen said with a smirk. I didn't leave the house last night. I just drank too much and passed out here, Melissa corrected her. Darren called Jess this morning, claiming you were unfaithful, and that's why he didn't go to work today. He's so distraught he's planning to leave town for a bit to clear his head, Helen informed her. What should I do? Melissa asked, her world turned upside down. Firstly, don't let him leave without a word. If he gets away and starts to reflect, he might just decide to move on for good. You haven't been the partner he deserved. But if he leaves with Jessica, you'll be facing an uphill battle, Helen advised. I can bet if they escape to a secluded spot, he'll find himself captivated by her. By the time they return, you'll be a distant memory. Helen's nod conveyed her certainty, deeply familiar with her sister's charm. What you should do is show him some real affection and care, Helen suggested. All that trying to be in charge has only pushed you two apart. Maybe it's time to let him lead for a bit. Melissa picked up the letter Darren had left her. She went through it as Helen busied herself with phone calls and whipping up something in the kitchen. Helen had a point. Melissa felt a wave of emotion overwhelm her. The thought of losing Darren, largely due to her own need to control and play games, was too much to bear. Here, drink this, Helen offered, extending a glass filled with a green concoction that resembled a milkshake. What's in it? Melissa inquired, wary yet curious. Just drink it, Helen insisted, a knowing look in her eye. It'll help you feel better after last night. Update. Darren was overwhelmed. He couldn't bear the thought of playing that cursed song even one more time. He regretted ever composing it. This place didn't feel like home. The people around him were strangers bound by nothing more than their shared love for music and a penchant for reckless living. No wonder they lacked originality in their music. Their creativity was clouded. Then, his gaze landed on Jessica, who seemed like a beacon of light amidst the chaos. She stood out with a radiance that made everything else fade into insignificance. He had crafted that song for her, and if she wished to sing it, he would endure, playing it repeatedly until it reached perfection. Can we try it once more? Jessica requested, her focus on refining the song's crescendos. Darren managed to smile and nodded. Taking the day off had been a wise decision. He wouldn't have been able to focus, haunted by thoughts of Melissa's betrayal. He couldn't understand what he had done to deserve this. He had given Melissa his heart and soul, even after overcoming his guilt for things beyond his control. His love for her never waned. He had always hoped she would overcome her own scars to reciprocate his love. When that didn't happen, he made excuses for her behavior, convincing himself that her reserved affection was enough. However, Melissa's association with a negative influence worsened everything. Darren felt increasingly inadequate, and Melissa's public disparagement was the last straw. Her infidelity shattered any illusions of fidelity he had maintained throughout their marriage. As Darren played the guitar, his fingers lightly dancing over the strings, Jessica's voice filled the space near him. Though she sang the words, they were Darren's feelings and wishes he had longed to express to Melissa. Jessica was merely his medium. He wished Melissa could understand the song's true essence, the pain and frustration she had caused him over the years. But that chapter was closed, especially after her last unforgivable act. Melissa's actions the previous night had definitively ended their marriage. Tonight's performance, this song, symbolized Darren's new beginning. Darren had planned a straightforward approach for confronting Melissa, but Jessica proposed a more symbolic gesture. Helen had been trying to reach Jessica since the afternoon, concerned about Melissa's well-being. Finally getting through, Helen's conversation with Jessica revealed the depth of the situation. Despite Helen's plea for restraint, Jessica made it clear that Melissa's recent actions had irrevocably damaged her marriage to Darren. Jessica defended her stance, distinguishing herself from Melissa's reckless behavior, emphasizing her respect for personal boundaries and loyalty in a relationship, contrasting sharply with Melissa's recent indiscretions. Jessica, where is he now? She really needs to speak with him, Helen inquired. I doubt he's ever going to have a conversation with her again, Jessica responded. However, he's currently off adding some finishing touches to his car. If she's looking to catch him, tonight at your club might be her only shot. The one where I performed last week. I'll be there again tonight, debuting the song he penned for me, in front of a live audience. We'll make sure to be there, Helen confirmed. Listen, you, the lady of the house, and your circle of friends need to dress appropriately, or you won't be allowed in. It's going to be a packed event tonight. Expect something out of the ordinary. Helen pondered what her sister meant by out of the ordinary. It didn't really matter, though. They were all quite charming and never faced an issue entering before. Inside her professional space, Agatha Harkness reviewed the file of her latest client. Agatha was often thought of more as a mystic than a therapist. Her methods in counseling seemed to work wonders, salvaging relationships and marriages that seemed beyond repair. This case, however, would require something akin to actual sorcery. Listening to her client's tearful and frantic account, Agatha was taken aback. For a decade, the woman had been incredibly harsh towards her husband, who endured it all. Had the roles been reversed, Agatha was certain she would have advised anyone enduring such treatment to leave the marriage immediately and never look back. Yet, she found herself in a position of contradiction, attempting to guide this woman to acknowledge and confront her issues. The troubling part was that Melissa hadn't yet accepted that she was the source of the problem. She admitted to not being the kindest to Darren but didn't think it justified his abrupt decision to end their marriage. Melissa was still of the mind that her actions towards Darren were warranted, holding on to resentment from a past relationship in college that ended poorly. "Okay, Melissa," Agatha began, "I believe I have a clear grasp of the situation now. May I ask you a few questions?" Melissa nodded in agreement. "Was Darren the person from college who hurt you and then left?" Agatha inquired. "No, that was Ryan," Melissa replied. "So, your actions now are somewhat of a shield, aren't they? A way to ensure you're never put in that vulnerable spot again, right?" I mumbled in agreement. "I suppose so," I admitted. "And there's a part of you that craves a bit of retribution for the shame you felt." "Yes," she prodded further. "Perhaps," was all I could muster. "Do you harbor those feelings towards all men, or just the one who caused you pain?" She inquired gently. "It'd be irrational to feel that way about every man," I responded. "I don't despise men. In fact, I find their company quite enjoyable." "I see, you've mentioned getting quite close to a few individuals during your nights out. And your husband, does he behave inappropriately with you in public settings?" she asked. "Absolutely not," I retorted. "That would be mortifying. I'd never allow it." "Yet, you seem to have different standards for strangers," she noted. "It's not the same. With those men, it's purely superficial attraction. They don't care about me, they're just after a moment of pleasure, which they won't get." "But Darren, he loves me, so he ought to act with more respect," I explained. "So, is what happens at the club your way of demonstrating that you're in control, that you won't let yourself be mistreated again?" she asked. "Perhaps," I conceded. "The thought never really crossed my mind before." "And why Ryan? What made you choose him as the one to open up to in such a significant way?" She delved deeper. "He was charming, and he whispered promises of a forever that painted a picture of the life I dreamt of. I believed he loved me, but it was all a facade, just to get close to me and then leave me behind. And the worst part was everyone knowing how naive I had been. It was utterly embarrassing." "And after that experience, did you find yourself exploring new relationships?" she inquired. "No," I snapped, a little too quickly. "The only interest I got was from those who thought I was gullible or naive." "And Darren, did he see you as someone easy?" she pressed on. "I made him wait quite a while before I agreed to go out with him," Melissa shared with a smile. "And he was always so respectful." "Melissa, all those things you desired from Ryan seem very similar to what you have now with Darren, even down to the dream house. Is that just a coincidence, or did Darren share those desires?" Agatha inquired. Melissa chuckled. "Darren isn't fussy about our living situation. His priority is simply being with me," she explained. "Has Darren ever pressured you or mistreated you in any way?" Agatha probed. "Absolutely not," Melissa responded firmly. "Darren loves me. Has he ever insulted you or been emotionally hurtful? Has he been unfaithful or prioritized others over you?" Agatha continued. "Never. He knows I wouldn't tolerate any of that," Melissa stated emphatically. "So, why do you think Darren has been so patient with you, especially when you've admitted you wouldn't accept such behavior from him?" Agatha asked. "You've described him as a handsome man. What makes you think he's tolerated behaviors from you that you wouldn't stand for yourself? You're incredibly fortunate, Melissa. You've faced challenges, as we all do, but it seems you've struggled to move past them. Growing up involves overcoming tough times. You left for college full of dreams and encountered someone who disappointed you deeply. When he showed his true colors, you sought retribution, making Darren, who has truly given you everything, pay for mistakes he never made." Melissa was visibly shocked, at a loss for words. "If you had met your husband first, your life would be perfect, right?" Agatha asked. "Yes," Melissa replied tersely. "So, it seems your husband is compensating for the past, paying for the actions of someone from your college days. He's bearing the consequences not just for that person's actions, but also for your own choices before him. It's as if he's also paying for the inability to confront the one who truly hurt you, and for your struggle to hold yourself accountable for those earlier decisions," Agatha observed, shaking her head. "Strangers in crowded places seem to have free rein to get close, yet the one person who stood by you through thick and thin for a decade needs your green light to express his affection. Is this the reason you're seeking help?" "Dr. Harkins, you're painting a bleaker picture than it is," Melissa countered. "Darren and I connect regularly, at least once a month. If only I could pinpoint his issue and mend it. Then, everything might revert to how it used to be." "Melissa, please leave my office and return when you're prepared to confront the truth. I shouldn't say this, it's quite unprofessional, but I do hope your husband finds his way out of this." Melissa left in a huff soon after. Her friend Helen stood up as she saw Melissa come out. "That doctor is out of her depth," Melissa fumed. "She can't distinguish a thing, much less help fix my relationship." "What did she think? What advice did she give?" Helen inquired. I told her about Darren's recent strange behavior, his sudden talk of separation and all. And there she was, making me sit and bombarding me with questions about our marriage and my personal life. She implied I'm the issue, Melissa shared. Melissa, I know it's hard to accept what Dr. Harkness suggests, but remember what I told you. Helen said once they were back in Melissa's car. You suggested I should make more of an effort, Melissa replied dryly. I wasn't being literal, Helen clarified. I'm not sure about your preferences. What I meant was, if you want to hold on to him, you'll need to start putting his happiness first now and then. He's always seemed content before, Melissa retorted. No, Melissa, he wasn't. Perhaps he was content to be with you because he loves you. But I doubt he was ever content with the way you've been treating him. No one would be. Let's be honest here, just between us, and I promise it stays between us. Why do you want Darren back? And how much does it matter to you? It matters a lot, Melissa confessed. I only realized it recently. I thought I could manage my feelings and keep him at a distance. It hit me about a month ago when Darren insisted we visit this couple, Tim and Elaine. They were so affectionate with each other, and they had a baby. They looked at each other as if no one else existed. Tim and Elaine Matthews, Helen inquired. Wow, you're fortunate they didn't start getting overly affectionate right there and then. Anyway, they were in their kitchen and I overheard her saying to her husband that she found Darren quite charming, but that I wasn't exactly her favorite person, Melissa shared. Melissa, that's because you can be a bit harsh, Helen pointed out. And just like you noticed Tim and Elaine sharing those special glances, Darren looks at you in the same way. But unless you start seeing things clearly, he's going to move on and start sharing those looks with someone else. Remember the conversation we had about getting too involved too soon. My younger sister might be a bit of a free spirit, but she does have her limits. She's not going to make a move on him for real until you've made your separation official. But believe me, she's not going to wait around for the ink to dry on those papers. And while you're hoping he'll come back to you, she'll be there for him in ways you weren't, seizing every opportunity. While you're reminiscing about the rare moments you were intimate, she'll be making sure he forgets all about it by being there for him consistently. You do have one thing going for you right now. He's loved you for so long, you're practically a part of him. Currently, the odds are in your favor, but each day that passes, the scale balances more between you and my sister. At the moment, when he thinks of you, he's reminded of the pain and hurt from thinking you were unfaithful. When he thinks of her, he remembers the thoughtful things she's done for him, like that creative project with his car and the song she inspired, and it's helping him move past the hurt. Soon, he'll view you both similarly. If the comparison between you and my sister ever levels out, Melissa, you'll be at a disadvantage. I've already mentioned she's got a bit of an edge in looks and is ready to go the extra mile to win him over. She's had her fun and is now looking to settle down. Not with my husband, she won't, Melissa exclaimed, her voice rising. Update: Helen had reached out to Sandra and Danielle, inviting them for a night out, a tradition they cherished deeply. It was their ritual to gather at Melissa's place before heading to their favorite club. This time, Sandra had news to share. She was considering making this outing their last. She had met someone special, and he wasn't too keen on her clubbing habits. Are you really choosing him over us? Danielle couldn't hide her disbelief. Look, the whole point of these nights was to find someone worth it, right? Sandra retorted. Usually, we end up meeting people who aren't right for us, and here we are again. But this guy, he's different. He's not without his flaws, but who is? So, yes, if you must put it that way, I'm choosing a different path. We'll still see each other, but I won't be out here pretending to be something I'm not when I've found what I was looking for. And you're okay with him dictating what you do? Danielle was astonished. Absolutely, Sandra confessed. The way he makes me feel, I'd do anything for him. Maybe if you weren't so hung up on your ex and his new life, you'd understand. That's ridiculous, Danielle snapped back. I'll never give up my independence. Well, I hope that independence keeps you company, Sandra said softly. As we get older, I want someone who will stand by me, even if I change. What will your independence offer you then? As for Melissa, it's clear something's off with Darren. What's more important to you? Controlling everything or the comfort of his embrace? Melissa was visibly moved, fearing she might be losing her connection with Darren. Arriving at the club, they were met with an unexpected sight. The parking lot was closed despite plenty of open spaces, and a long line snaked down the block. What's happening here? Danielle exclaimed, puzzled and frustrated. I warned you we needed to be here early, Helen said with a hint of irritation. Jesse mentioned tonight was going to be special. Exiting the car, they approached the entrance, only to be redirected to the queue by the familiar bouncer. Looks like we're stuck waiting for ages, Sandra remarked. Helen stepped aside, dialed a number, and her face lit up with a smile. We've got access. Let's go, she announced, returning to the bouncer with her phone. After a brief conversation, they were allowed inside. As they neared the entrance, an unexpected thunderous noise caught their attention. A convoy of at least 20 yellow cars stormed into the parking lot, one particularly eye-catching convertible among them. Melissa felt a pang of distress seeing Jessica's flowing hair from the car that zoomed past, with Darren, Melissa's husband, at the wheel, oblivious to Melissa's presence. They disappeared into the club through a side entrance. Helen swiftly pulled Melissa inside. It quickly became clear that finding a table was hopeless. Luckily, a friend of Danielle's was sitting alone at a table and welcomed them to join. Danielle soon hit the dance floor with him, while the man who had approached Melissa last time came by. Picking up where we left off, he said, attempting to get close. Back off, Melissa snapped. I can't let my husband see us together. Realizing she was married, the man walked away without another word. It's a bit late for precautions, Helen remarked dryly. Jessica must have told Darren about your encounter last week. Melissa's heart sank. It seemed her current predicament only added to the reasons Darren might want to leave. She realized she had never really been in control. Darren had made choices out of love. Now, as he made a different choice, Melissa desperately wanted him back, acknowledging that any control she thought she had was an illusion. Determined, she began searching the club for Darren, convinced that waiting would only worsen their situation. A large crowd had gathered near a small stage, an unusual setup for the club, which Melissa suspected had something to do with Darren. Approaching, she found herself faced with two imposing bouncers guarding. They gave Melissa a dismissive glance, treating her as though she were insignificant. No entry, one of the security guards declared, promptly dismissing her with a turn of his head, signaling the end of any potential debate on the matter. Melissa observed the crowd within the exclusive area, failing to discern what made them stand out. The group was a mix of various ages and economic statuses, with nothing apparent linking them together. Then, she spotted a familiar face. It was the woman who had rudely insulted her. Their eyes met almost simultaneously. Elaine, the woman, gestured for Melissa to join her at her table. Melissa hesitated, gesturing towards the imposing security guards. In response, Elaine let out a sharp whistle, capturing their attention, and signaled towards Melissa. One of the guards, a giant of a man, turned towards her and, with a deep voice reminiscent of a classic movie character, welcomed her inside. Thanks, Melissa said, approaching cautiously. I hope you don't mind me asking, but where's your husband? It's just odd not seeing you together. Elaine shrugged. People often ask. Both of us had our own lives in previous marriages before we met. It feels like my real life began when we started dating. Anyway, Tim's backstage helping your husband, Darren. He's not having the best day. Elaine shared that Darren was facing a challenging evening, hinting at possible marital issues without prying. She revealed that Darren, who hadn't performed publicly in over a decade, was scheduled to play guitar at an event attended by music industry scouts, adding to his stress. Noticing Melissa's concern at the mention of Darren facing difficulties, Elaine remarked, "There might be hope for you yet." Confused, Melissa inquired what she meant. Elaine explained, "I was starting to compare you to my ex, thinking maybe you didn't truly care for Darren. But seeing your reaction, perhaps you do care. Don't worry, he wasn't physically harmed. It's just that he got overly confident with his car and lost a race to Chrissy by a significant margin. Maybe Tim's just got a knack for driving," Melissa suggested. "That would have been even more complicated," Elaine replied. "I was hanging out with Chrissy then." "Oh," Melissa said with a grin. "Look, I've sort of changed my mind about you," Elaine continued. "I hope you get a chance to chat with him. But this spot isn't the best for that. You might want to move closer to the front, where you're more likely to catch his eye. We're here to cheer for Darren. Joining YMN, the Yellow Car Nation, means you're part of the gang. But we prefer staying a bit back from the stage to avoid the hustle. If you don't catch him here, we're planning a midnight drive to our spot. Feel free to come, but make sure your friends stay polite. Best of luck." Melissa returned to her friends. Danielle quizzed her about how she accessed the VIP area. Ignoring the question, Melissa shared that Darren was part of the evening's lineup. Before Helen could react, the MC announced the opening act. He was a hefty fellow with unkempt hair, stuck in an 80 Seconds vibe, delivering a discordant rendition of Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne. The crowd didn't let him complete even the first verse. "The crowd's unforgiving tonight," Sandra observed. "They usually let the first few acts slide. Wonder what's got into them." As the evening progressed, 8 performers took their chances. 2 received warm applause for their commendable performances, while the others faced a spectrum of reactions, from mild approval to outright rejection. One performer, in his attempts to channel Rod Stewart with "If You Think I'm Sexy," dressed in overly snug pants, nearly incited a revolt. Another uproar was sparked by a performer attempting Ride the Wind by Poison. His performance, marred by boos from the onset, escalated when he responded with rude gestures, leading to a scuffle in the parking lot post-performance over his provocative act, poor singing, or possibly just the song choice itself. Then the atmosphere shifted. As some band members exited, they were replaced by a new set, their appearances lean and intense, embodying the quintessential rock star aura. Their presence was predatory, their gaze over the crowd inscrutable as they tuned their instruments. Suddenly, the stage darkened. When the lights flashed back on, Darren stood solo on stage, ready to perform. Melissa felt a surge of irritation as a group of women near the stage started to cheer loudly for him. She was protective, not wanting anyone to cheer for her partner like that, aware of the typical crowd this venue attracted. Ironically, she had once been part of that crowd. Darren gave a shy, youthful grin and began his performance. The only background to his melody was the subtle beat of the bass drum marking time. His tune was engaging, though not groundbreaking. Melissa offered him a supportive smile, but it went unnoticed. The loud cheering from the women at the front was starting to grate on her nerves. Then, as Darren's song took off with a powerful bass line enhancing the simple melody he had started with, the vibe in the room shifted. The crowd went wild. Jessica appeared on stage alongside Darren, her energy and movements captivating. Darren matched her enthusiasm, his performance growing more dynamic. The song's lyrics seemed to echo the struggles in Melissa and Darren's marriage, from his perspective. Jessica's powerful rendition spoke of feeling overlooked and misunderstood. Melissa recognized these were Darren's feelings. The music intensified, joined by additional musicians, and the crowd danced along, fully engaged. Melissa couldn't help but feel guilty, as if Darren was using the song to air his grievances about their relationship to everyone present. Nodding your head, but not hearing a word I say. We can't connect when you dismiss, don't understand. I've tried reaching out, but it's as if you're not there. So what now? Can you even hear me? Hearing Jessica sing these words, Melissa came to a painful realization about the state of their communication lately. Was she really so neglectful? The energy of the room peaked as the song reached its chorus, with the audience getting caught up in the moment, attempting to sing along to a song they had just heard. As the chorus rang out, the club's atmosphere electrified. I'm over it, feeling like you just don't see. You never listen, always missing. Caught in your world, you overlook me. In that moment, Melissa saw the depth of Darren's frustration, mirrored in the song that resonated with everyone but was deeply personal for them. I've had it up to here, so now I'm making a scene, Jessica declared, mockingly dramatic as she sang, drawing laughter and knowing glances from Darren and herself. Melissa, on the sidelines, felt a surge of irritation, almost ready to throw a tantrum herself. Never listen, you just never listen, Jessica's voice echoed, making Melissa's heart sink. I shout your name, but everything's the same. I yell and scream, so now, what I'm gonna do, is let it all out. Hey. Darren had indeed let it all out, Melissa mused. Like a champagne bottle too shaken, he'd burst, taking their marriage with him in the process. Melissa watched as Jessica sang, noticing Darren mouthing the lyrics, his focus entirely on Jessica as if they were in their own world. As the song reached its climax, with the band joining in, it was clear Darren and the guitarist were in perfect sync, adding to the spectacle. Jessica's next verse hinted at dwindling patience. Was it a sign that Darren had moved on from Melissa, or just fed up with the drama? As Jessica approached Melissa during her performance, pointing directly at her, the crowd parted. Stepping down, Jessica handed Melissa a roll of paper, likely the song lyrics, before swiftly returning to the stage. The crowd, now fully engaged, sang along with Jessica and Darren, turning Melissa's personal turmoil into a public spectacle. Surrounded by an audience that seemed to relish the drama, Melissa felt isolated, holding the papers that felt more like a symbol of her situation. As the performance ended, Jessica's announcement over the speakers, calling out Melissa Thomas, felt like a spotlight on Melissa, despite her silent acknowledgement. You've been served, echoed through the venue, a public and theatrical end to Melissa's marriage. The band departed to cheers, leaving Melissa amidst a crowd too caught up in the moment to notice her distress. As some rushed backstage, chasing the thrill of the night, Melissa was left to face the reality of her situation, the spectacle of her personal life laid bare for all to see. Jessica had personally handed over the documents Melissa had opened, only to be shocked to find they were divorce papers. This clearly placed Jessica right in the middle of the turmoil. What had Helen mentioned about her sister? All of Helen's cautions flooded back to her. The moment you receive those papers, that's when she'll make her move, Helen had warned. She'll be with him every night, leaving him exhausted, Helen had ominously stated. She's younger, more attractive, and more appealing than we are, Helen had remarked bitterly. She's eager to settle down and start a family, Helen had concluded. Update. Melissa and Helen hurried out of the club just in time to witness a procession of yellow cars exiting the parking lot. They knew their destination, so there was no rush. They climbed into Melissa's car and departed, leaving Sandra and Danielle behind. The entire drive to Tim and Elaine's house was enveloped in silence. Melissa pondered over the evening's revelations at the club. The thought that her husband might leave her for another woman was devastating. She was deeply hurt. She had dedicated the prime years of her life to him. He was supposed to be hers alone. She wasn't going to let anyone else come in and shatter that. Upon arriving at the house, it was buzzing with the energy of bright yellow muscle cars and a few others. She found a spot to park and made her way to the house. The scene was lively, with people genuinely enjoying themselves. The more she observed, the angrier she became. She noticed cheers and saw various games being played. She was astounded to see such festivity so late at night, almost midnight. However, she noted that the gathering was purely about enjoyment, a stark contrast to the club's charged atmosphere. Here, it was about fun and camaraderie, not sensuality. She inquired about Darren's whereabouts from Elaine. Darren and Jessica aren't here, Elaine informed her. Their band landed a recording deal based on tonight's performance. They're still at the club, working out the contract details. Didn't you realize his car wasn't parked outside? Melissa was silent, simply turning on her heel and leaving. She sought out Helen and together, they returned to the club. Her frustration had mounted, yet she recognized her part in this misunderstanding. She had mistakenly thought Darren was with their friends. Ironically, despite his affection for his car, she realized she hardly knew its appearance, only that it was a convertible. Upon her return, the club's parking lot was deserted, save for a few limousines and the distinctive yellow convertible. Approaching the entrance, she was greeted by a towering bouncer who cracked a smile. "You're quite persistent, aren't you?" he remarked, beckoning her inside after a brief glance. Inside, Melissa found Darren and Jessica sharing a table. "We're leaving, Darren," Melissa demanded, her voice firm. "I'm willing to overlook what happened tonight, just this once. We need to have a serious talk at home." Darren gave her a puzzled look. Meanwhile, Jessica hummed a tune under her breath, the melody irking Melissa further. "Melissa, you received the documents, right? The ones from the show don't count. Official papers will reach you by tomorrow. This separation is for the best. You never truly cared for me, and I've grown weary of playing your attendant," Darren articulated calmly. "So, you plan to abandon our marriage to chase dreams with her?" Melissa retorted disdainfully. "No, I've already got a fulfilling job. Becoming a rock star is too much hassle." Jess feels the same about her career. "What we lack is each other's company, which we intend to explore post-divorce. I suggest you find a lawyer, as I'll be seeking to keep the house," Darren stated, standing and taking Jessica's hand, leaving Melissa behind with only the bouncer for company. In the days that followed, Melissa hired an attorney, who initially chuckled at Darren's reasons for divorce, suggesting a stronger case could be made for other allegations. However, during their initial legal encounter, Melissa's lawyer recommended seeking a settlement, revealing Darren had video evidence of Melissa's indiscretions at the club, and although not explicit, it was compromising. Additionally, footage from their home depicted Melissa in a less than flattering light, showcasing frequent verbal outbursts towards Darren. "You also disrespected him in public. The most damning evidence, though, came from the therapist you saw. Because you're under his insurance and married to him, he's entitled to know about your sessions." He shook his head. "Just settle this and move on. Facing a judge won't make you look favorable," he advised her. With no children involved and the divorce being uncontested, the proceedings moved quickly through the court. 3 months later, right after the divorce was finalized, Darren proposed to Jessica, who happily accepted. As part of their divorce agreement, Darren paid Melissa for her share of their house. This gave her some financial cushioning, though it was hardly a comfortable life. Melissa found herself missing Darren intensely, struggling with the loss. The hardest part was that song. It seemed to follow her everywhere that summer. Darren and Melissa didn't join the band on tour. A new guitarist and a singer named Victoria took their places, but the hit record featured Darren's guitar skills and Jessica's vocals. They even appeared in the music video with that yellow car, enjoying success on TV shows. That woman even moved into what used to be Melissa's home. Melissa temporarily moved in with Danielle, but it was a difficult arrangement, with both finding it hard to live together. Melissa also held Danielle partially responsible for her marital issues. 2 years on, Jessica and Darren welcomed their first child, eventually having 3 children and living a content life. Melissa, on the other hand, gained weight and, as her finances dwindled, took up waitressing. She often visited her old neighborhood, watching Darren and Jessica from afar, tears in her eyes, yet unable to stay away. Hearing that song on the radio always brought a wave of discomfort. Update: Melissa and Helen hurried out of the club, just in time to see a line of yellow cars leaving the parking lot. Melissa knew their destination, so there was no rush. They left in Melissa's car, leaving Sandra and Danielle behind. The drive to Tim and Elaine's was silent, with Melissa reflecting on the evening's revelations at the club. The thought of her husband leaving her for someone else troubled her deeply. She had devoted the best years of her life to him. He was hers, and she wasn't about to let anyone disrupt that. Arriving at the house, they found it alive with the buzz of yellow muscle cars and more, a stark contrast to the club's charged atmosphere. The party here was about joy, not desire. Melissa searched for Darren, her frustration mounting with every cheerful scene. At last, she found Elaine and inquired about Darren's whereabouts. "He and Jessica aren't here," Elaine explained. "Their band landed a recording deal based on tonight's show. They're still at the club working out the details. Didn't you notice his car wasn't outside?" Melissa, wordless, turned on her heel, fetched Helen, and they drove back to the club. Her anger had grown, yet she recognized her mistake in assuming Darren's presence with the others. It was ironic that despite his love for that car, she couldn't even recall its appearance. When she arrived back at the club, the parking lot was deserted, except for a few limousines and a yellow convertible parked around the back. Determined, she approached the entrance and knocked forcefully. The door was opened by one of the imposing bouncers, who greeted her with a wry smile. "Persistent, aren't you?" he remarked, before gesturing for her to come in. Inside, Melissa spotted Darren and Jessica at a table. "We're leaving, Darren," she declared firmly. "I'm willing to overlook what's happened today, just this once. We need to have a serious talk." Darren gave her a puzzled look while Jessica softly hummed a tune, barely audible yet unmistakably irritating to Melissa. "Melissa, did you receive the documents? The ones from the show don't count since they weren't officially served. You'll get the official ones by tomorrow." This is really for the best. You never truly loved me, and I can't continue living like I'm just here to serve you," Darren explained. "So, you're planning to leave with her and just forget everything about us?" Melissa retorted sharply. "No, I've got a job I'm good at, and I'm not chasing after a rock star dream. It's too demanding. Jess has her own career she's passionate about. What we're missing is each other, and once we're officially divorced, we're going to see where that takes us. You might want to consider getting a lawyer because I intend to keep the house," Darren stated. He then stood up, offered his hand to Jessica, and they walked out together, leaving Melissa standing there with the bouncer. In the days following, Melissa sought legal counsel. Her lawyer initially found humor in Darren's reasons for the divorce. He could have pursued adultery charges, though it might be hard to prove, but it would have been easier than proving emotional distress. During the initial legal meeting with Darren and his lawyer, Melissa's attorney suggested aiming for a settlement. "Darren has footage of you at the club, engaging in activities that, although not explicit, could suggest unfaithfulness. No partner would approve of such behavior. Moreover, he has recordings from your home that show you verbally lashing out at him frequently. You also undermined him publicly. The most damning evidence, however, comes from the sessions with the therapist you attended. Given that his health plan covers you, he's entitled to know about the counseling you've received." He shook his head disapprovingly. "Just resolve this and move forward. Facing a judge won't cast you in a favorable light," he advised her. Melissa looked visibly distressed, her complexion pale, hands trembling, and her demeanor anxious. "Have the paperwork ready for me to sign tomorrow. I want to conclude this," she demanded sharply. Across the table, she could see the toll her actions had taken on Darren. He looked weary, the strain of the situation evident in his expression. His lawyer, smugly confident, seemed almost amused by the proceedings. Melissa recognized him, even if he thought otherwise. Leaving the meeting, Melissa felt an unexpected peace. Tomorrow marked a new beginning. She ventured into parts of town she usually avoided, feeling it was necessary. The day was spent touching base with friends, uncertain of their reactions to her news. People's responses to life changes were unpredictable. Melissa felt a pang of sorrow for the life she and Darren could not have together, especially the dream of having a child. Yet, she was resolved that after tomorrow, all her regrets and grievances would be behind her, freeing them both from past mistakes. Perhaps there was even a chance for reconciliation. That evening, she found herself longing for Darren's company, impulsively calling him. To her surprise, he answered. "Melissa, why are you calling?" he inquired. "I just wanted one last opportunity to speak with you," she responded. "It's too late for us, Melissa," he replied, a note of finality in his voice. "I wish things were different, but I can't see a way for us to move past this. I know, I just wanted to tell you that you were the best partner anyone could ask for. I hope you can forgive me someday. And, maybe, come see me. My love for you is deeper than you'll ever realize. It just took me too long to see it," she confessed. "Melissa, given everything that's going on, we probably shouldn't even be talking like this. But you should know, I did love you too. And like you mentioned, maybe there'll come a time when all the hurt has healed, and we've both moved past this. Maybe then we can be friends again," Darren said, ending the call with a heavy heart. The next day, Melissa found herself in her lawyer's office, settling into a chair with a composed posture. Her lawyer slid a stack of papers across the table towards her. "I don't see the need to go through these, why bother?" she remarked nonchalantly, positioning her purse in her lap as a makeshift barrier. Time seemed to slow as she waited, her gaze fixed on the clock, until Darren's arrival broke the silence. "Good morning, dear," she greeted him with a warm smile. "You're looking well today. Why don't you take Jessica out for something fun? Don't waste the day dwelling on me. Today's not a day we'll get to meet anyway." Darren's response was a smile, an exchange of unspoken words through their glances. As the door swung open again, Melissa's smile widened. "Morning, Ryan," she greeted with an upbeat tone. Ryan looked surprised. "Wasn't sure you'd remember me, it's been ages," he said. "How could I forget, Ryan?" Melissa responded, her voice steady, masking the storm beneath as she deftly retrieved an object from her purse, a shocking twist to their reunion. The story took a dramatic turn from there, shifting focus to the aftermath and how life unfolded for Darren and Jessica. Their musical journey hit a peak but eventually plateaued without Darren's creative spark. The narrative explored the dynamics of their relationship transitioning from romance to a profound friendship. Darren's life took a disciplined pattern, marked by his unwavering visits to Melissa, demonstrating the complexity of their bond. Their story, tinged with devotion and resilience, unfolded over the years, culminating in a shared life that, despite its trials, was filled with mutual respect and love. My comment, a twisted ending indeed. Melissa was a complete head case no matter what. Feel so sorry for Darren. Jessica deserves a better ending though.